Hello, everyone. All right, so today hi Mitchell. We will be looking at Sam's games. I thought this was a really interesting position. So it is black to move. Hello, Simon. The question is, what should he play? So let's start with the move that comes to mind first. What do you think that is? We know our opponent is threatening rook to d6 check, picking up the knight on c6. So we probably should be doing something about that. Bob, your move, okay, makes a great deal of sense if we're worried about our opponent's threats, but we should also consider alternatives just in case. All right, Aagaard, which one? Okay, yeah, but which one? All right, Simon. Okay, you wanna cover with the rook. Okay. All right, Aagaard. And Mitchell, great. Okay. So since the threat is rook to d6 check, and it's true that my king on f6 is a bit awkward, but at the same time, white's king is stuck in the center as well, right? And our knight seems to behave better in this position than the bishop because it's stuck due to the pawns on f3 and c4. Therefore, hi, Arun. I would like to check other options besides queen a5 trading queens or any options that defend. I want to go for attacking options. So since this is the move, rook d6, I can stop it with rook d8. Oh, knight d4, I'm hanging the queen. So rook to d8. What's good about rook d8 is I'm threatening to take on d1 check, and then my rook is coming to e8 check. And we see that here black is basically playing a rook up, right? Because the h1 rook cannot make it into the game. That's why I'm thinking about gaining more than trading queens here. However, two rooks can go to d8. The barrio, sure. If you send them to me, I will take a look at them. Right. So, which rook should we put on d8? How can we figure this out? Right. So the first step. This is one of those comparison positions, and we should always take them seriously. Right. Whenever we have to move a rook to a certain square, we have to try to figure out which is the right square, which is the right rook. Sometimes they're equal, sometimes, but most of the time, in my experience, they're not. There is a difference. So the way to work this one out is I have to try to see what my opponent will play after rook d8. Okay, let's put the a rook on d8. Like I think most of you who've given rook d8 have put the a rook on d8. All right. So after rook a d8, what do you expect white to play? All right, Mitchell. Yeah, I know. Sam, yeah, definitely. Which is what you went for in the game. This is quite important. We need to. Hello, Naushad. Thank you. So what is white going to play after rook a8? And we need to figure that one out. We don't want to play it and then, see what white does. If there is any good move for white, I want to see it. Rafa, yes, that's the move. Let's see if anybody else spots it. Haroon, if you play that, I retake with the rook, then it wouldn't matter. And your king is stuck. I have quite a big attack with black. Okay, exactly. Rafa, you got it. Bob, if you play that, I would trade rooks, and then I come with my rook to d8 anyway. It's not an easy defense. Sam did see it in the game. And Mitchell, I think we can agree that I'm going to have a huge attack there, right? And there's a single move we should be worrying about. So so anybody else? Basically, if I trade rooks on d8, black is going to have, as I said before, an extra rook in the game. So I need to change the position somehow with white. And there's a very nice move. Rook to d5. The purpose of rook d5 is after rook takes d5, c takes d5, queen takes d5. And what does white play there? Yep, Sam. Rafa, you got it. Bob, no, there's a much better move. There's Arpon, yes. Remember, Bob, our main issue here with white is that rook on h1. So after rook a d8, rook d5, rook takes, pawn takes, queen takes. Haroon, yes. The black queen has moved away from the a7 g1 diagonal, so white can castle. And he's no longer in danger. As soon as the white king gets out, he's fine. Now, since we know rook d5 is coming, we have to decide rook h d8 or rook a d8. We do have a response. So let's say after rook a d8, rook to d5. If I take, he's going to castle. So I have another move with black. Check on b4. The king goes to f2, and that's the main difference. Which rook, white is attacking the knight. Which rook would you rather have on d8? The a rook or the h rook? And why? So I'm going to do this. Rook to d5, queen b4, king f2. Yes, Simon. King f2. And here, do we have any move with black? Yes, Bob. Yeah, I don't have any checks here, captures. Okay, I can capture here, but then he takes. It's not so clear. So let's go back a second. And now we're going to do the same thing with this rook. Rook to d5, queen b4 check. And what's the difference? What move does black have here? Yes, Mitchell. Sam, Arpon, correct. Boris. Yeah, now black has rook a to c8. And he wins instantly. So I thought it was a really nice comparison position. Black only wins with rook h to d8. This is one of those situations where we try to use logic at first, and we just decide based on that. Like, oh, look, it looks logical. Using logic, rook a d8 makes more sense because we can play rook h to e8 later. The logic doesn't make it. We need to try to calculate first. And if we can't figure out the difference, then yes, okay, we're left only with logic, and we'll go with that. But try to calculate your way to the move. Right? This one is not easy. But rook h d8 wins. Rook a d8 was played in the game, and Sam found rook d5, and he managed to get his king into safety and eventually drew the game. All right. So let's see the entire game because the opening was nice. It was a draw. Sorry. Flip the board. Okay, so it starts out with this A3 variation, which Nico's suggested. And yes, the purpose is to prevent bishop b4 in some lines. But it's actually a lot trickier. So in the game, black played queen c7. One of the ideas behind a3 is that knight to f6, knight c3, we are already threatening e5. Okay, once the knight comes out to c3, there is no longer queen a5 check, picking up the pawn. So this is a threat. And after, this is the, it starts with a con, Haroon, but a3 is a new thing. I don't think that's got a name. d6, and here we can play bishop e3, bishop e7, and I suppose Nico's recommended queen e2 because I saw a Renier game with it. And it's a very interesting position, okay? Anyhow, I mean, we've gotten these e6, a6 players into more a Scheveningen position, so that's usually a pretty good result. White can also play with f3 and even f4. I think one of the better moves here is bishop to c5, I believe. Anyway, queen c7 was played. And here, of course, the point behind a3 is to play c4. And after knight f6, knight to c3, and white has a Maroczy bind, and bishop b4 is no longer an issue. White is slightly better here. Instead, after queen c7, Sam, you went for knight c3, and now a3 is kind of not really useful. Knight f6, bishop e2, and b5. Right, so what should white play here? This was on the sheets. No, I don't think so, Sam, because b4 would be quite annoying. There is a standard reaction on these positions. Okay, Harlan, we'll see. So here it's important to understand, Ian, yeah, that is correct. It's important to understand what setup should white be looking for. So how do you think he's going to put his pieces? Where do, for instance, the f pawn, where is this guy going? f3 or f4? Yeah, Tarun? Okay, it's important because we've placed the bishop on e2. If white intended to put the pawn on f3, he should have done that right away. f3 and bishop e3. But if you put your bishop on e2, you should more likely be looking for f4 and bishop f3. That's why it's important to, if you're going to go for that, play f4 right away. So that bishop b7, okay, or d6, so that we can play bishop f3, and the f pawn is already on f4. The problem is in the game, Sam, you played bishop e3, And after bishop b7, unfortunately, you should now you either have to play bishop f3, which you don't really want to because the f pawn is not included. And if you play f3, it's going to be hard to go f4. And the bishop on e2 doesn't make much sense. So f4 was much more precise. f3 was played. And here, black has a ton of good moves. He decided to go for b4. Pawn takes, bishop takes. And what should white do here? Take that. Or what would you play in this position? Tarun, absolutely. Simon, correct. Tarun and Rafa will talk about that. Mitchell, yes. Anybody else wants to suggest a move here? Okay. One thing I've mentioned. All right, Ian. So we'll get to that. One thing that I always mention is in chess you do not want to defend. Like you only defend if you must. And in this case, we have to think about, is bishop c3 a threat or not? So we would be sacrificing a pawn, but we're also getting the two bishops. So it's not a whole pawn. It's about half a pawn. And black is giving up the dark squared bishop with all the pawns in light squares. So this guy is going to be really strong. Therefore, the move I would instinctively start thinking about is castles. Just forget about the pawn on c3. I don't want to defend this knight. Now, if I think it's bad, all right, that's different. But if I think this is interesting, I don't even need to evaluate it as really good for white. I would be happy, like, it's interesting, I'm going for that. And put the pressure on my opponent. Okay, you want to take the pawn, go ahead. Right? But never play passively just for the sake of it. So in this case, castles, I believe, is much better. And after bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, so black is taking huge risks here, I believe. What would you play with white? There are several good moves, but there's really one which is quite strong. Sam the rook on a1. Not a bad way to arrange your pieces, but has an issue. And it's also, going backwards. Boris. Okay, Boris, that's a very decent move. There's a stronger one, though. Let's see, Haroon. But I suppose Mitchell is a bit too much. And Haroon. All right. So what is White's compensation here? Definitely one of the good things about White's position is the bishop on e3. What else? No, it's not. It's yeah, okay, it kind of is, Mitchell. It would be awesome if that were the move. And Tarun, yes, black is underdeveloped, but we don't really have an attack right now, do we? We're not aiming for black's king right now. His king, once he castles, is perfectly safe. What we have here is compensation due to the pawn structure and the fact that black is quite weak. So there's a neat move here, and it's to take advantage of that. Bishop f4, as I said before, several people have given this move. It's quite good. White has a strong advantage after bishop f4, more than enough compensation for the pawn. But the strongest move is queen d3. And the intention behind queen d3 is that we accelerate and get that rook from f1 to b1. Black is in huge trouble here. He's not going to have enough space for all the pieces. So one line, for instance, is queen takes d3, bishop takes, and after castles, goes rook b1. And then we're going to play c4. And you can't see where to put the pieces. Bishop c6, and where do you put the rest of the pieces? After bishop c6, you can never play d6. It's incredibly annoying. So white here is close to a winning advantage according to the end. I was surprised about that. But I really love this idea. There are many moves, Rafa, but you don't even need to pick up the pawn. Right? But main point I want to make here is there is no need to see queen d3. Queen d3 is quite difficult. It reminds me of a Smyslov game where he played something similar, although he wasn't a pawn down, but he had double c pawn, so it was close. Queen d3, we trade queens so that the queen's a really good defender of weaknesses. If the queen comes back, it can hold the queen side. But without the queens and the rook comes to b1, black has issues with these pieces. They just cannot develop. Anyhow, we should still play castles, and after queen c3, if we don't see this move, bishop f4 is quite good as well. Right? But queen d3 is best. So in the game, you went for bishop d2. Sam, and this is a concession, and we don't ever want to make concessions to our opponents. We take back with the bishop, Sam. So here black went d5. And I can relate to this. He wants to break quickly, and it makes sense, but there's an issue with it. Takes, bishop takes, knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and knight takes. All right. What can white play here? Bob, actually, that is better. It's a better option for black, but still, white is doing fine. Haroon, yeah, I like your move. Rafa, yes. And Boris, what was your intention after, say, castles? Now shot, yes, that's correct. Yeah, there's a neat move here with white that does annoy black. A lot of you have given it. Yes, Simon. It's bishop b5 check, which Sam did see. Boris, I would still have knight to e7, I believe, in that line. Bishop e5, he did see it. Unfortunately, after knight d7, here Sam missed the move. What is it? No, Rafa, not that move. Yes, Sam, that's the one you missed. But Rafa, there, I would castle and your pieces are awkward. The type of moves, nothing wrong, Rafa, but just comparison. Type of moves we're looking for are fast moves. Anything that captures, attacks. That is one, Rafa. There's another one. Naushad, yes. And let me see, Ian. Oh, you got a point there. Still, Ian. Okay, we'll let me see. Ah, shoot, I can't make it work. Yeah, so I would probably have to go back, Ian. Okay, so a couple people have given other moves. We're looking for something quick. Options that we have here. C4. Yes, Simon. C4 is one, attacking the knight. However, I think I can just drop back and I'm not doing too badly. Second idea that is attacking is bishop C6. We attack the rook and we hit the knight. And captures, we can take on A6, but black will say rook A6, bishop A6. We castle, and black is fully developed, and my pieces are loose. So the move, exactly, Mitchell. The move we're looking for is bishop C6. So basically, we look for options, and in this case, bishop C6, we will take on D5, and that pawn structure is already pretty good for white. And that's what Sam missed. He just didn't see bishop C6 here. So instead, he went for knight B5, queen C5, C4, knight to C7. There were some mistakes here. Knight D6 check. Black could have played better than this. And we got to this position. By the way, back here, Sam, you should have considered B4. Attacking the queen first, and only then knight to D6 check. But okay, knight D6, there's nothing wrong with the move yet. And king to E7. So what should white do here? And here I have to ask you, Sam, which options did you consider? Harun, the knight is hanging. Okay, Sam. All right, Mitchell, any other options so that you can compare? Okay, Rafa, same thing. Let's see if we can get two options here. All right, Mitchell. And then we decide. We have two alternatives, two candidates. We decide. Okay, Sam. Okay, you got a point there, Ian. Although black can play some other thing. All right. So the type of moves, again, we're attacking. Definitely, black's king is in the center. We have uh, quite a few interesting options. Black is attacking the knight, so definitely rook d1 comes to mind, protecting the knight and including the rook. But we should always look for other options: captures, attacks. So, is there any attacking move here for white? And Naushad, yes, although I think you have a much more natural way to do it. Okay, so the attacking moves I can think about here, I can think of, are knight b7, knight e4. Okay, just through comparison, I'm going to start with knight e4. It's a centralized knight, it makes much more sense. After knight e4, what is black going to do? Mitchell, if you played rook d8, I would just take the queen, right? All right, Haroon. Yeah, I don't see black playing too many moves here after queen e4. I'm sorry, knight e4. So let's start. Let's say queen e5. What does white play after queen e5? Yes, Simon. And Ian, correct. Tarun, correct. Yeah, after knight e4, black's queen is going to be chased off either this square, like we're going to come in with the queen to g5, or this square on b4. And there's no move. Queen e5, queen b4, check. The king is stuck in the center, and we're castling. Every single piece is out, and we're equal material. White is winning. And if you play queen to, say, b6, then there's, let's say, queen b6, check here. And what can I play here? If king f8, queen d8, check, and I pick up the queen on b6. So there's no good move. Knight e4 just wins. So that's the type of move we should always be thinking about. Like attacking moves, let's check them, see what happens, especially in a position where we are playing with dynamics, right? We're attacking. So rook d1 was played instead. And the move, of course, we defend the knight. Rook d8 is not playable because of knight f5 check. Black does have a defense here. Once you see it, it makes all the sense in the world, but coming up with it during the game is difficult. So black cannot play this. Rook to d8. And in the game, he played knight c6. And we get to what happened in the game. The best move here is, keep in mind, if we're defending, what does the defender, what should he be seeking in order to defend? What is the best way to defend any position where you're being attacked? Yes, Mitchell, but which one? When you're facing a strong attack, there's one thing you can do that usually will not completely stop, but at least it will lessen it will minimize the impact. Trade queens. That's something we should be looking for. Therefore, after rook d1, how can you prepare a queen exchange? That is one way, Rafa. Fortunately, it's not best. Mitchell, yes, that is the best move. Oh, Simon, that's interesting idea. I hadn't thought about it. Bob, yes, that is the move. Trying to see if I can refute your move, Simon. I have a feeling I should. Oh yeah, there is an easy refutation. I have knight e4. Oh yes, Ian. Okay, so there are two moves people are coming up with. Knight d5 doesn't work because of knight e4. So knight c6 and a5. Now a5 is the move. This is the best defense. And after king f1, I'm just suggesting this to avoid trading queens, but then knight e8 and black is folding. Because king f1 is really awkward. a5. Trying to queen b4. Now, in the game, he played knight c6. Yes, it's makes sense. He's going for the same move. Unfortunately, there is a strong idea here for white, which is hidden, but it is there. It's white to play and win or gain a strong advantage. And it's the only downside of knight to c6. Bob, you're onto something there. Mitchell, that was played in the game. We saw that it's got a big problem. Remember that our opponent is intending queen to b4. Sam, there is a defense there. And I would suggest look where the weak spots are. Yes, Sam. Where are the weak spots in black's position? Got it, Mitchell. That's the move. Haroon, either of those moves, queen b4. I trade queens. Nope, Rafa, it's not. Right? Haroon, you can't because my queen is on c5. Ian, there's an issue with the. Okay, well, probably not a huge one, but so this is the weakness, right? This is one. And this is another. This guy right here is loose. In fact, some people are suggesting knight to f7 and queen to d7 check or queen f4 check and pick up the knight. So these are the two weak spots. This is the tactical targets in the position. Once you spot those two weak spots, and I'm saying weak spots, it's not because I'm choosing them. These are the spots that are defended and attacked by the same number of pieces. One, and this knight is just loose. So once we see those tactical targets, we should be looking for moves that, aim at those two weaknesses at the same time. Yes, no shot. And Ian, I suppose when you gave knight f7, your idea was queen f4, right? Okay, Tarun, we'll see. Exactly, Ian. So the right move is queen f4. You hit the pawn on f7 and the knight on c7 is hanging. So now we have that knight f5 trick as well. And white is much better. I took a look at this and then queen takes c7. Now, knight f5, knight f7, I think it's going to be the same problem. So knight f5 was played in the game. And if you remember, we had this position, right? This was the initial exercise. And it was black to play and win with rook hd8. So what's good about queen f4 is that we keep our options open. It's simply much better. Black is in trouble after queen f4. Okay, we know how the game went, and eventually it was a draw. All right, so let's move on to the next game. All right. Okay, this comes from a Najdorf. One of these long English attack lines. I'm going to flip the board. Is Sam to move. So what are the typical ideas here for both sides? All right, Sam. Okay, you got black's idea, and we'll talk about white's. Of course, this is going to depend on whether you play the position with either color. Yes, Forrest, that is one idea. You can also um go a little bit further, but it's the same thing. Right. So in this line of the English attack, white gains control over the d5 square, and black is left with this bishop, which Shuba used to call it's a bad bishop which protects a good pawn. So that's he always said that this bishop is not so bad because it does a good job. All right, so this bishop is not the best because of this pawn structure. White has good control over the light squares, especially in the queen side. And yes, Ian, correct. We would love to get this knight. This is the bad piece for white. So we want to try to get this knight to d5. That's a much more active square. Sometimes white retakes on d5 with a pawn, and in that case, the knight either makes it to e4 or c6, right? With a white pawn here on d5. As to black, yes, Sean, correct. As to black, here there's a weakness on the weaknesses are c2. This is more tactical because white can solve it, and f3. This is the main weakness, f3. That's the one black should be aiming for. That is his counterplay. So as Sean and others are mentioning, the idea for black is to break with the f pawn, open the f file, and hit the f3 pawn. That is his main source of counterplay here. And in fact, black should have just played f5 right away. And Sam, you knew this. And yet you played something else. You played a more defensive move. And now we're seeing a trend, right? There's something going on there. You're playing the defensive move. And we'll see it again later in other games. The bishop b6 is nothing. I mean, you could just move the queen, right? Of course, if you had a rook on d8, I would understand, but this is just attacking the queen. Move the queen. Nothing happens. And you need to get that f5 in at some point. So here, f5. No, you move the queen to either. You could just go to b8 if you want. So here, f5 should have been played. We're attacking the pawn on e4. And what's so great about this move is what happens after gf6. Nope, Sam. Again, same thing. Stop and think. Sean, yes. Now, Shad, you got it. Simon, correct. Sam, yes. The trick is you can come back, take with the knight, and the point is the e4 pawn is hanging. In fact, White's last move was a mistake. He left the rook on d5. He should have moved back. Now what? Black is just better. So f5 was a tremendous move. And the point I'm bringing this position up is because it was a defensive idea you went for, Sam, instead of going forward. And later on in the game, you had a much better position when you agreed to a draw. Right? But this is f5 has to be played. Let's see here. So in this position, it's black to move. What would you go for here? Rafa. Sam, okay, we'll see. Yes, Simon, correct. Nice move. By the way, what would your evaluation of the position be here? Sean, correct. And yeah, Simon, I agree. So anybody had any thoughts on what the evaluation is? Let's see. Okay, Rafa, why do you think so? Mitchell, we'll talk about that, right? And Bob, I said, Bob, can I play Queen D2? All right, Sam. All right, yes. No, Rafa, I was asking why do you think your evaluation, so that is your evaluation. Okay, Sean. So if we break it down here, okay, king position, about the same. Both kings are safe. Material is equal. Who's got more space? Who do you think has got more space? This one is tricky. Right? Remember that space is not only about having your pawns advance, but it's also the feeling of being restricted. Well, I'm going to flip the board so you can feel it. Right? Sometimes the pieces do play a role, but it's true that white's pawn is the further advanced one. I agree, Mitchell. White feels more restricted here, and there are some other issues. The pawn on e5 could turn out to be weak as well. Black is much more active. Yes, Ian, absolutely. Black is much more active. This rook is in play. His queen is centralized versus this queen on d1. And this bishop, due to the pawn on e5, is a problem. Okay. When you put everything together, black has to be better. It's just that I don't see any issues with black's position, whereas I see many, not huge issues, but small ones for white. Black is much better. Now, white is hitting the knight. What do you think about the knight on d3? Is it standing on a good square? Is it annoying white? Yeah, it looks like the knight will be kicked away. But if we can keep the knight on d3, if we can keep it, it keeps the rook on f1 out of the game. I can't go to e1, I can't go to c1. As long as the knight stands there, this rook is not playing. So we have absolute control over the c file. That's why we should aim to keep it. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't consider other moves as well. It's just that anything else seems to just move the knight out of the way, and that's it, which is what happened in the game, Sam. So here, the best move is queen e4. And white is just cramped. It's hard to move here. Queen e4, and it's difficult to come up with a move. By comparison, this is what should have been played. and we'll take it from there, right? No need to show a win for black. It's just a huge advantage. So instead, Sam, here's where you lost the thread. You just went back and forth with the knight. You just didn't know where to put it. So here you played g6 and rook c1. Now this is it's a normal position. It's not dynamic. It's positional mainly. So since it's positional, the three questions: where are the weaknesses, where do our pieces belong, and what is our opponent intending? So is white intending anything here? Any threats? No, nothing. So where are the weaknesses in white's position? Yes, Rafa. This could turn out to be a weakness. Any other one? Yeah. The worst placed piece is the bishop on e7. It can be improved, right? And the bishop should go to c5. We attack the weakness on f2. The bishop goes here. If need be, we can play a5 later. If white somehow manages to play a3, we can play a5. So we have control over the d file. f2 is weak. e5 is an issue for white. Black is much better. So he's still pressing. In the game, you went knight b4 again. And here there is a very interesting move. What would you play with black? This is a pretty good way to play the position. And it goes in nicely with something we said in another game. Okay, Rafa, you can always play that. Let's see if you can come up with some other move. Okay, Rafa. Yeah, I like that one. And there are many ways to play this position. Okay, it's just I'm looking more for ideas rather than concrete moves. Yes, Sam, I like that one. And Mitchell, absolutely. Exactly, our pawn. All right, so the option I was referring to here is queen d3. I mentioned in another game, right, the queen d3 move. Since white is riddled with weaknesses, we can play queen d3, trade queens, and try to get to the pawn on a2 and the pawn on e5. It just makes white's life more difficult. But it's very understandable if you want to keep the queens on the board because it's just more active. So there are other ways to play the position. And I would be broken here and just, I wouldn't know whether to play queen d3 right now or play something else in a game. Maybe I would keep the pressure. Our pawn was suggesting a5, just gaining more space. But queen d3 is quite an interesting strategic idea. At some point, trade queens so that the weaknesses become more noticeable. With the queens on the board, it's a bit more difficult. Okay, so in the game, Sam, you played bishop f8, queen c1. And now white is gaining an initiative. And eventually the game became a mess. Okay. And we got to this position. So what's your first instinct with black? All right, Rafa. Peru and Sam. All right. That was played in the game. Yes. Okay, that's a good first instinct. And what about a move? No shot? Yep, our pawn. That's what I would aim for in a game. Okay, now shut. In the end game, I think there are four elements that we want to take into account. Piece activity, past pawns, pawn structure, like weaknesses and stuff like that, and finally material. Material is, I think, is the less relevant one. Okay, I'd rather be more active than be in equal pawns when I'm defending. In this case, I don't think black is defending. It's his move. The only small issue is the pawn on f6, which could threaten mate after rook c1. What I would aim for here with black is what our pawn was mentioning before. This pawn is either a strength or a weakness. I would try to surround this guy with my king, and I want to keep my rook on d4 because it's active. The issue with rook f4, which has been suggested and eventually played in the game, is that here after rook f4 and rook f6, the rook remains awfully passive there. I really don't want to play rook f4 here. So I would try my best to maybe look for options like g5, h6, and get my king to g6. I have to say this is still a draw, whatever black plays. But if, for instance, the pawn were on h6, g5 is probably just much better for black. Okay, sometimes we have that reaction of trying to gain material, and remember that active pieces is more important than winning a pawn. Okay, in this case, it's a draw anyway because white is just in time. In the game, this was played. Rook c7, a5. This was the point Sam had. He wants to play e5, but rook c6. Rook f5. Rook takes here, here. a4. Absolutely, again, the same thing. The rook on b2. Sam did not play this. With the rook on b2, cutting off white's king and putting pressure on b3 weakness, it's a very easy draw. Rook d5 is much more passive. His opponent played rook b5. It's still a draw after king f8. Unfortunately for Sam, he was in deep time trouble, and he took. I'm sorry, no, he played this, and then king e2, and now the pawn on a5 drops, and he's lost. Right, so king f8 was forced. It's still a draw. But we saw how passive play eventually turned a really good position. Sam, you were outplaying this guy. But at some point, you started going back instead of thinking actively. And just go forward. See what happens. Okay, now we're going to take a look at a few games with a similar theme. And we're going to start with this one. Quickly go through the opening moves. This is not a great opening for white, but okay. a4. Here you played b4, Sam, which is fine. Another option is bishop b4. I think it's more active too. Bishop b4. You pin the knight, you threaten this guy. And black is just better. Okay, b4. Knight to b1, takes on e4, takes on c4. Knight here, castles, and queen f3. Okay, this was a position in the sheets, and it's black to move. What should he play? Yeah, Sam. I think that gives white much more than he deserves in this position. Because it weakens your position quite a bit. Okay, our pawn. We'll see because that happened in the game. Any other option for black? And Haroon, so pushing the F pawn here, the problem is it weakens E6 and quite a bit. I mean, it turns the Sig4 bishop into a really good one. It's pressuring E6. Right now, black is a pawn up. The position is still quite solid. And it's not like he's so far behind in development. So in a game, I think I would be seeking to be better here with black. Maybe, it's dynamics, so maybe I would change my mind after some calculation, but that's what I would be looking for. I think white's main compensation here is his the fact that he's got some space due to the pawn to d4. So black is a little bit cramped. He needs to get his pieces out. Now, whenever we're facing space, there are two ways we can fight it. We can either trade minor pieces so that the space is felt less. And the second option is to break whatever is restricting you, the pawn, just, break and get rid of it. In this case, the restricting pawn is this guy on d4. That means that at some point we want to play c5. That should be our, goal at some point. But okay, first things first. Our knight is hanging. Since we have less space, we want to try to trade minor pieces, get rid of people. Bishop e5 at first seems weird because we're giving up the bishop here. That's already a small concession. However, after bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, where does the knight go? Yes, Sean. Rafa, that's a weird spot for the knight. We go back to d6. We hit the bishop. White, I suppose, is going to move it away. And what do we play now? All right, Arpan, that's pretty good, I think. Although, yeah, white has an intermediate move, unfortunately. Okay, f6 is being mentioned. And I think it would be great if white moves the bishop, then we go knight f5, and I really like that position. Because after bishop takes, we're attacking the d4 pawn. After bishop takes, pawn takes, and this bishop will make it to d5. That would be a nice position. But after f6, can black play something else? Yes, Bob. Yeah, Mitchell. White has another move. I think it's annoying. Yeah, we can play queen h5, hitting the pawn on h7, and or even queen h3. Yeah, queen h3 may be better. And after knight f5, I can take here. I suppose we can still calculate this a little bit, but in g4. I don't know. Maybe we can play something else. g4, knight h6. Maybe it's still playable. Somehow. All right, we'll need to take a look at it. But there's another move. What's the move here? What's the move black wants to play? At some point, yes, Arpon. Yeah, Ian. And there's another strategically desirable move here for black. So I think. So bishop e7 to play c5, and the other option is bishop a6. No, we can play it bishop a6. It's the strategic move. And after bishop takes, knight takes, queen c6. Yeah, here we would have to stop and consider either rook c8 because there's a check in the back rank, or as Sean said, queen to c8. It's also interesting. Queen to c8, and after the queen trade, we take with a rook, and we've given up the pawn, but our knights are quite good. I don't know which one I would go for, but they both look interesting. Yeah, this one looks, I have to say, this one looks pretty good. So after this, oh, but queen takes, no, queen d6 is just losing. So he would have to take this one, check, king e2, we take on h1, and after he takes on d6, we're just going to move the queen out, and I mean, the king is dead. Looks at least a very strong attack. Yeah, I think I like this one better. And we're not even that far behind in material anyway. It's 2 pieces for a rook. Yeah, looks quite good for black. All right, so bishop takes e5 was the better move. Now in the game, instead, you went here. And I want to reach another position, this one. So what should black play here? Mitchell, I like that one. So the move black is trying to get in here. Because now, okay, bishop a6. Yeah, we can play it, I suppose. But the move we are aiming for is this one, c5. Right? Some of you are giving knight to d5. But if I want to play c5, and I want to be as quick as possible just to get this the knight, weaken it, undermine it somehow. Is there any issue with bishop e7 here? There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it. Right? I'm just going to play c5. I know, Sam. That's why I'm bringing this position up. So bishop b7, and then we'll play c5. And it looks fine for black. He's still a pawn up. He's getting his pieces out. Looks okay. However, in the game, Sam, yes, you started thinking about knight takes f7 tricks, which don't really work. So you went for the passive move again. And that means you're playing just in case moves. And we don't ever want to play just in case moves. Work it out. This is the one you want to play. See if knight f7 works. If it doesn't, you play bishop b7. Right? Because now you're playing too slowly. Your opponent, well, he should have just played knight d2. So I'm going to show you one possibility here. After bishop b7, bishop to d3, c5, queen g3, knight h5, queen h4. You can't take the bishop, g6. And black is fine here because the center is collapsing too quickly. However, it's bishop e6, Rafa. However, let's do this after rook e8. Sam, I think you could even take on f4. let's say knight d2. And I'm going to give you the same variation I showed you before. Bishop b7, bishop d3, c5. And this is just the extra tempo. The knight comes in, it's just killing. Yeah, that's why we can't give anything to the opponent. All right, so bishop g5 was played. Knight bd7 is the right move here, but we play bishop e7. And here I want to reach another position, okay? I'm just pushing forward, getting to another position here. Knight f6. All right. Bishop g5 is the best move here. And what does white have here? Yeah, this is an easy one. Yeah, Simon, and just knight f7. This is a typical trick, the isolated pawn. Queen is on h3 is hitting the pawn on e6, so knight takes f7 wins instantly. Right. In the game, he instead played knight g4. It's still quite good for white. Here, black should have taken on g4, sacrificed the exchange, and hoped for the best. The position is still bad, but rook e8 was played. He went back. Bishop f8. Great. Okay, Sam, here, I mean, you're doing the best you can. Bishop g5, bishop c8, trying to hold somehow. Position is absolutely lost. And now rook to c6. This is the position I wanted to show you. Black to play. Yeah, Sam. There'll be a glitch for a second. Right, sorry about that. Sean, yeah, you got it. Nice. Now, Shad, I think that's just going to leave you in a bad spot. All right, we're definitely looking for tactics here because white has just played a tactical move. Let's see if we can find something. There is, Rafa. Okay, keep in mind, whenever we're going into tactics, so first of all, it doesn't matter whether it's a tactic coming from us or our opponent, but our first instinct should be, I don't believe you. And we're going to try to refute the tactic. And we're going to look for those weak spots in the opponent's position. That's usually where things are going to happen. So he's just given up a rook on c6. And of course, the move we want to play is knight takes c6. And his intention is to take on c6, take the rook, and then the knight on f6 hangs. Now the question is that correct? right? This is the move we want to play. We would like to take the rook. You are, Rafa. See if anybody else sees it. All right, Mitchell, you're going for the back rank, but you're right. It's protected by the knight on b3. Although well spotted, I have to say. You got it, Tarun? Boris, correct. Bob. And yes, Bob, you got it. Okay, so the loose piece in White's position, right after knight c6, knight c6, there are two loose pieces in White's position. The knight itself and the bishop. This bishop too. So it's this guy, once we take. And Mitchell was pointing out the back rank because it's only protected by the knight, but unfortunately, we can't do anything with that. I'll see you, Tarun. Thank you. So knight takes c6, knight c6, and here black has queen d5. Boom. Hitting the knight and the bishop. So he just gave up the exchange for nothing. All right, Sam missed queen d5. He played queen d5 right away. And here, it's the same thing. I'm going to flip the board. White to play and win very fast. Yeah, Sam. Simon, correct. Mitchell, correct. Right, the version I think should be pushed a little bit further, but you got the point. So that's it. And Boris, it's probably winning, although you have a faster way to do it. Yes, Rafa. So Boris's move seems to win. Ian, you're given the same thing. I can't really say that is wrong. It just works. But bishop f6, knight takes c6. A lot of you are giving bishop e4. That seems to be winning quite handily. After knight a7, Simon, I would take the bishop on g5 in that line. So here, bishop e4 does seem to win, but there's a really nice win here with queen h7. King takes, check, bishop h6 is forced. And amazingly, after knight g4, there's just no defense because queen h5, rook takes h5, and the g6 pawn is pinned. So this is just going to be mate or lose huge amounts of material. So we see this Shanklin rule, right? White wants to take the knight on f6, and he could actually make it work. Right? So in the game, instead of rook c1, and eventually somehow Sam managed to swindle this, right? Which is good. I mean, you held on, and eventually he made a huge mistake, and black won the game. Right, I'm going to show you one more game. Here we go. And I decided to choose this one. Okay, so it's an Alekhine defense. G6, bishop c4, here, bishop to g7. All right, this is all theory. And e6, right? So in the Alekhine, what's the main point? What is each side looking for? Okay, Sam, But it's important to understand what we're looking for, not just the theoretical moves, but the idea, the strategic idea for both sides. Yes, no shot, correct. And Mitchell, absolutely. Bob, yeah, correct. Oh, Arpana, I'll see you. I know it's pretty late over there. Thank you for joining. By the way, I have to write. I forgot. Um, okay. So the point behind the Alekhine is black entices white to push his pawns forward, and then his idea, just like the modern opening, the modern defense. What we're trying to do is hit the center and take it away from white. So usually, once you start pushing the center, black intends to hit it with the C pawn, take away the D4 pawn, and eventually end up with a center pawn and take space himself. That's the idea in the any of these modern openings. So we're behind in space the first 10 moves or so. We try to break that center and eventually take the center ourselves. That's the hope that black has. But of course, white can also try some tricks. So first of all, since white has space, he wants to hold on to it. I don't want to give it up for free. Therefore, I'm trying to keep the pawn on e5 as long as I can. Make black work hard to get it. And in this case, Sam, you just gave it up. You played e takes d6. And I know you wanted to stay away from theory. But one thing is staying away from the main stuff, which is kind of like you're giving up material and stuff like that. I understand you don't want to go for that if you don't know it well, but I don't want to relinquish my strategic advantage just like that. There are two ways, Sean. There's the theoretical way, and actually Sam did know about it, but probably only the first move or so. So here, one of the better moves is here, queen to f3. This is an O line. I was surprised to check this, and it's still pretty much the same thing as it was 20 years ago. So queen f3, queen e7, protecting castles is possible, but it's pretty good for white. This is the main line nowadays. And then knight to e4. So we see that through dynamics, white is holding on to that pawn on e5. Now he wants to go bishop g5. So d takes e5. And now white has two options. He can either play bishop g5. And after queen b4, this is all theory. It still looks pretty good for white. And the other option is d takes e5. We're still threatening bishop to g5, h6, preventing it, knight f6, and king f8. And I still like white, right? This is the main thing. Just play it. But don't give up that space. All right, so going back here. You played e takes d6. Black took with the queen, c3, castles, castles, a5, and now a4 should have been played for sure. Just actually a4 has got two advantages. So one of them, we keep that bishop on b3, making e5 more difficult. And secondly, once the pawn reaches a4, can you see a really nice way for black to bring his pieces in after once he plays a4? It doesn't always come up, but sometimes it does. So I'm going to show you. I'm just going to push, let's say, after, yes, no shot. Knight f3, a4, bishop c2. There are many lines where black can actually use this fourth rank with rook a5 and make it to the king side. Okay, now let's look at it from black's perspective. white is still, he still has some space, right? Due to the pawn on d4. Actually, black could have just taken with the c pawn before, but he played this way. White has the d4 pawn. How is he supposed to play in this position? What is his strategic idea or plan in this case? Rafa, you're right, and Sam, you're right too. And Sean, absolutely. Those are the two main options. Now, shot. Okay. Um, Ian, I'm not so sure. You got a point there, but we do have more space on the queen side. So the main ideas for black. He wants to get rid of this guy on d4, which is restricting black. That's where white gets his space from. So we want to go for either c5 or e5. In both cases, what I'm trying to do is get rid of this pawn on d4. And both are good. I think c5 is more human, I have to say. It's just simpler. c5, I'll take on d4, knight c6, I get my pieces out. Ian was suggesting maybe doing it right away with a pawn back here on a7. I suppose that also makes sense. Now, I think it's easier. However, Sean has got a point, and that's what James went for. He went for knight c6, which is not a bad move. But I had this on the sheets. Because if black can get away with it, this is a much better way to do it. Because once he gets e5 in, the bishop comes back to life. So when I said c5 is easier, it's just that it's less of a hassle. However, if I'm playing black and I really want to win, maybe I'll go for knight c6. Anyway, it's white to move here. What would you play? But Sam, that's going to weaken your queen side. That's actually working for black. Okay, Rafa, that was played in the game. Wow, good move. Yes. Interesting, Sean. Yeah, trying to prevent your opponent's idea. I hadn't thought about that. It looks interesting. Yeah, Sam, that's what Sean is suggesting as well. Okay, that's so bishop e4 definitely comes to mind, trying to prevent e5. I was about to try something. Let me just try, right? After bishop e4, if I go, and I know this is a bit crazy. Yeah, maybe it's a bit too much. I was wondering about f5, and after bishop takes, take with the pawn. Of course, I've given up this square on e5. I get that. But I do have the light squares, and my intention is to go c5 next move, or at least try. So I'm still aiming to get rid of the d4 pawn, and I'll probably go c5, c takes d, and c5 if necessary. And my light square bishop can be quite strong at some point. But this is risky, strategically speaking. I have no clue whether this is the right approach for black or not. I'm going to turn on the engine just a second. See if it just smashes me somehow. Oh, no, it doesn't. Thank you, Mitchell. I'll see you around. Yeah, it seems to work. All right. So the other move that could be played is knight a3. And I like the knight on a3 because, first of all, we keep this knight on b6 busy because we have access to c4. And in some cases, the knight can go to b5. But the most important thing about knight a3 is that it leaves the c1 bishop free to move. So this move can actually cause black some problems. After e5, which is the main point behind black's knight c6, we have knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and bishop f4. And suddenly it's not that easy to equalize with black. He still does, but it's difficult. So the line I analyzed here, but it's anything but easy. It's just rook a5, protecting e5, rook e1, and bishop e6. But this is weird. Black gives up this pawn, and then bishop a2. It just works. There's one more move I'm going to show you, e6, and knight d5. Only move. So it just goes to show that after knight a3, black has to be hyper precise to equalize. Very tactical. So knight a3 was the better move. Instead, knight bd2 came, and black played e5. Pawn takes, knight takes, knight takes, bishop takes, knight to f3. And here I'm not sure why black just didn't play this. And he's a bit better. Although the pawn structure is symmetrical, that pawn on a4 now is quite good because at some point we will play a3, and the pawn on c3 is weak. And if white decides to play a3, then b2 is weak, and the knight can jump at some point to c4. So it's a bit uncomfortable for white. Instead of this, and this is something we've been talking about, right? Just these this making concessions for free. Bishop g4, h3, bishop takes, queen takes. Now white has its bishop here, just like that. c6, bishop h6, rook fe8. And I think it's rook ad1, queen c7, rook e1. Okay, good. Sam, you kept the bishops on the board. And rook e6. So what would a good plan here be for white? He's got the two bishops. I don't really see much compensation for that. So he's definitely slightly better. But what is a good way to play this position? Okay, Sam, I absolutely agree with your your assessment. However, I'm not forced to take on b3. I could perhaps chase after your pawn on c3. So any other suggestions here for white? And we're looking for a plan, nothing concrete. Because one of the main issues we have here is it looks like, all right, Sean. Okay, although it does have its downsides, right? Because we give up the C4 square. Okay. Yeah, Sam. Although not the last one. So we have all the pieces, it seems, in the right spot. Everybody's trying to get this bishop to the A2, F7, or G8 diagonal, which is fine. I mean, that's where the bishop probably belongs. Problem is, however we try, we have to make a concession. If we go A3, then we're giving up the C4 square. And by giving up, I mean the knight lands and then we can protect it. The B3 is no longer there. And another option is, Sam was suggesting B3, but I'm not forced to take. Right? So every piece seems to be in the best possible place. And I want to improve a little bit more. There's a Karpov-like way to improve our position slowly. And it's quite standard for these positions. It's G3. Yeah, Sean. So there's two situations where G3 and King G2 is going to improve our position. The reason why we play G3 and then King G2 is the king is he takes up the task of protecting the light squares. And then we can push H4, H5 very slowly, try to weaken the black king side. That would be our main aim here. There are two situations where this is going to work. First of all, when you have the light square bishop and your opponent doesn't. So if you weaken the light squares a little bit, it's not the end of the world because your bishop is there. There's another scenario, and you can check out Karpov games, Leko games. Sometimes you got pawn structures such as this with this diagonal closed. And in those positions, G3 and King G2 can also be played because the king is not in any danger with the center closed and with the pawn on E4. So in this case, I believe this would be the better plan. White is just slightly better. Keep up the pressure. G3, King G2, H4, H5. Never trade the bishop here unless you get something in return. So what happened in the game is rook E2, and eventually everything was traded here. Bishop D2 is better. He played here, and just a draw. Actually, here black has a better move. Forgot about that. Yes, Sam. So let's see if anybody else spots it. Because it's been in the air for a long time. Yep, Rafa. Ian, correct, Sean. Got it. Simon, yes. A3. And black is suddenly much better. Sam, here we can see that again, you're playing passively. You're going for exchanges when you were better. You had the two bishops. So here, black, fortunately, he went bishop G7 and then bishop C5, preventing A3, and eventually everything was traded and it was a draw. Bishop F8 and bishop G7 was played here. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up here. Sam, that was the main thing. This you playing too passively, you were getting really good positions most of the time. But you reach a point in which instead of taking risks or just going forward, going for attacking possibilities, you start playing too passively. So that's the main thing to check, right? Take a look at those active players, Kasparov, Topalov, guys who always go forward. That could help. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining the session, and I hope to see you next week. That's good, Sam. Topalov, all the known Alekhine, all the known attacking players, especially the really I don't want to say solid, but Kasparov, Topalov, and Alekhine, they are not the same as Tal, for instance, or Sheriff. They're a bit more crazy. So I think Kasparov would go better with it. See you, Sam.